Good morning, Angela.
Good morning, Elena.
Today I brought a topic to you, Angela, that I have seen a lot of our PhDs struggling in the Job Accelerator program, and it's the work sample. So we have PhDs who move into different directions, into research scientist roles, but also into medical writing role, clinical research associate roles. And most of these roles require work samples. So for most PhDs, this is a completely new word. They've never thought about how such a work sample could look like. Well, we're very used to prepare presentations for lab meetings or scientific meetings. I assume there are different requirements when for example, you're invited and you're at the last round of an interview and you should give a presentation about yourself, your skills, or whatever they may ask for. So how can we think about these work samples, and what is a good way of preparing them?
Yeah. So I think one thing to remember that's really, really important about the work samples is what they're testing is to see if you can come on the job and start the job immediately. Whenever they give you a work sample, they're assessing really deeply if you have the baseline skills. So I've used work samples in the past, in companies that required research reports or something like that to see the person who's applying actually apply good design principles, or if am I going to have to teach them? Because teaching somebody good design can take actually a pretty long time. And there are a lot of people who don't know how to use the tools like PowerPoint or things like that. So the first thing to remember is if you're given instructions. So sometimes companies will give instructions, make sure that you're precisely following the instructions. So if they give you a word count, do not go over the word count. There's a reason why those word counts exist, and it might be directly linked to cost or to some protocol in their company. So if you violate those during your interview process, it says two things. One, you can't follow instructions, and if you can't follow instructions, you might cost us money. So make sure that you're following the instructions to a T. Don't go over on length. Don't try and cheat on length by changing font sizes or anything like that. That's noticed. So make sure that you're following the appropriate length requirements. The other thing, and this is particularly true in the scientific fields, is don't assume that just because other people are scientists that they're going to accept a very scientific output, because you have to remember that these are also business people. And in business, if you're asked to give, there's generally two types of work samples that I see people asked to give. It's either a writing sample or it's a presentation sample. If you are turning in a presentation sample, it has to be polished from a design perspective. You want to see polish, you want to see that professionalism. So don't use a splash of 20 different colors. Make sure that you have design on your slides. PowerPoint actually makes this really, really easy to do. And that's why it's so disappointing when so many people don't do it, because you can go into PowerPoint and just open a new presentation and just pick a PowerPoint theme. They've got a ton of themes baked in there. Pick one. Pick one that looks professional, it looks clean, it looks polished. Make sure that when you are presenting any kinds of slides, if it's a public company, go onto their website. Go onto the investor section of their website, find past presentations, and you can see their presentation style in those presentations. So you can see, for example, what type of headlines do they usually use on their slides? How do they display information on their slides? Is it more graphical, or is it more textually based? How do they do those things? And then you can replicate that style in your presentations. The other thing that's really, really good to do, and it's just a really nice touch, is if you can use the company's branding and their colors when you present information to them. And usually that's as simple as just going on, you can do this in ChatGPT actually, where you can say, hey, I'm putting together a presentation for this company. Can you give me their brand color palette? And ChatGPT does a great job of pulling up what that company's color palette is. And in tools like PowerPoint, you can actually go into a slide master view, and you can just change the color palette and it'll apply it all the way through the presentation. So really, really simple thing to do, but it adds a finesse and a differentiator that most people don't. So I think one of the most important things is don't assume that because your interviewers come from the same background as you, that they're going to be accepting of certain things that are done a certain way in academia. They're going to want things to be done in a business way. So make sure that you kind of take the time to do your research, do your homework a little bit. And oftentimes it's as easy as just taking a look at their website to see how they present information.
Yeah, and I would actually also add, Angela, and you can maybe also elaborate on it a little bit. When you know who you encounter in that interview, you usually get the names, and you could actually, check the backgrounds of the people, just get a little bit of an impression who is actually going to sit in there. I think one important thing is, of course, from a design perspective, but also from a content perspective, do never assume that they have all the same background and that they're all at the exact same level in terms of technical understanding. There may be some more senior people who come from a completely different background. So I would just say also really make sure the content that you put in and the way you communicate, you adjust it to the audience that you're gonna encounter. And this may vary depending on who's sitting in the room, right?
Right. And there are a lot of PhDs who have very specialized experience. Most PhDs have very specialized experience. And so even the people who are the most skilled in the room may not have specific knowledge of your experience. And unfortunately, I know a lot of PhDs like to put their publications in their resume. Just because you put them in there doesn't necessarily mean they've gotten read or that people are going to take the time to read them before the process.
Cool. Anything else, Angela, that we should add to that conversation?
No, I think the big one is just make sure that you're doing a little bit of research on the business standards around case study design, presentation design. Look for what we call white papers. Those are good examples of case studies. So if you go on a company's blog and they say, see how this company used our product, that's a good example of a case study layout. So you can go in and you can replicate these things so that when you come across, they look at your materials and go, A, this person did their homework because this looks like one of ours, and B, they can do the job.
Love it. Angela, thank you so much for your insights.
All right, take care.
Take care.